My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Are you a starseed? If so, where does your soul come from in the stars? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Matthew John, is an internationally recognized spiritual teacher, intuitive, psychic medium, trance channeler, intuitive astrologer, starseed guide, energy healer, medical intuitive, speaker and spiritual life coach and mentor, working with angels, archangels, ascended masters, and galactics. He's a gifted intuitive wisdom channeler, trance channel, and a transmitter of healing frequencies. His website is youareadivinehuman.org, and he joins me to share his path and how he discovered his starseed origins. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Matthew John. Welcome, Matthew.
Victor, thank you for having me. This is such a thrill. I've really been looking forward to this. I'm very grateful. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Matthew, for listeners who are meeting you for the first time and who don't know how we connected, you and I had the pleasure of both being on Portal to Ascension, Neil Gore's wonderful Portal to Ascension. That's how we met. And we immediately had a sense of familiarity and family and soul connection, and that's how we started.
I think it's the voice. I think we both know we were born for whatever reason. God wanted to give us a voice, you know?
Absolutely. Matthew, please share with our listeners your early life and path before your spiritual awakening.
Amazing question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. Wow. Okay. Well, I would say I grew up a pretty normal kid with an asterisk, I would say, because I do hear stories from my mother all the time about, for example, being in the back of the car, coming back from the mall and it was night and just like being obsessed with staring at the moon, just always wanting to go outside and look at the stars. Also just like things I said, I guess, when I was pretty young that were pretty like spectacularly intelligent for, someone that age. But other than that, I would say I grew up a pretty normal kid. My interests were sports, and more sports. That's all. And still sports are one of the loves of my life. But that was what I cared about, sports, and more sports. I was atheistic. My father was a scientist, and he was an atheist. My mom was a new age kind of hippie like I am now. And I ended up, when my spiritual awakening happened in my 20s, I ended up going down the same path that she did. But when I was young, I was an atheist. And I guess a proud atheist, too. I thought that religion in all forms was pretty stupid and pretty harmful to society and couldn't be farther from the truth. And I was, I felt that way up until my spiritual awakening took place in my early 20s. But yeah, pretty normal guy. Although the other part about me is I was incredibly intelligent. So I was probably, like in my high school, I think I ended up having the second highest GPA. I won all sorts of awards for math and for science, math especially. Also, I was an incredibly good writer. I won all sorts of journalism awards. So I was very intelligent. And I was an only child, and because of those two things, I always did kind of feel like an outcast amongst my peers, especially as I got older into junior high and high school. And I was treated as such. And although I loved sports, I wasn't as good as some of my peers, and that was another piece. And so that, kind of being outcast in high school especially, that forced me to develop a wicked sense of humor, because that's how I found myself being accepted by others. And I think developing my voice as well. I did high school radio and all that, and I just found that my voice and my humor is what finally got me to feel accepted by other boys and also girls as well. Because being an only child is very different. The other kids don't get you. You just naturally feel like an outcast. Any only child I've ever met kind of had a similar experience in high school of like, it's really difficult to try to fit in because it's not natural to you, right? But I know that that was all meant to be because I was meant to really develop my voice, my humor, my individuality, in this life.
I was not an only child. I have a younger brother and sister. But if you take away the sports aspect, you just basically told the story of my young life.
Really? Okay.
We have so
Interesting.
much in common. It's really, there's nothing amazing about this. It's just, it's natural because we both
Yeah.
shared very common interests. Other than the fact that I did have very much a spiritual awakening when I was very, very young, and we'll share that from when I'm on your show.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But for now, though, that background is just amazing. Now, your bio shares that this awakening began at the age of 22, when you
Yes.
faced some incredibly difficult tests. Please share with us what happened.
Okay. So the first the first part of that was I've told this story many times on different shows, and I love telling it. Was a true experience, a spiritual awakening experience where afterward I was never the same person as before, and it was an experience that I owe my thanks to psilocybin mushrooms. So I think at that time I was 22 and I was in Buffalo. I was going to school. At that time, mushrooms for me were just a fun thing to do on a Friday night, right? It kind of enhanced, it was a social lubricant. And when you combine it with alcohol, it was a real social lubricant. And at that time, my interest was trying to mate, shall we say, as is the biggest interest for most men in their young 20s, right? So for me, it was a fun thing to do, a party thing. But whatever this day, there was a beautiful September day in Buffalo with the leaves just starting, the early leaves just starting to blow off, a windy day. And I must have purchased the exact perfect, batch of mushrooms from the guy that I was meant to. And I had ingested some and I didn't really have any plans. Again, being that only child, a lot of my social outings in my 20s were by myself. I would go to the bar by myself and make friends, right? Which most people wouldn't have the chutzpah to do. But for me, being that only child at Aries North, no, that was usually my Friday night. And I just remember walking from bar to bar. This was South Campus, in Buffalo, for those of you Western New Yorkers that are listening. And I just felt really different. I started to feel really different, a feeling that I had never felt before. And at a certain point, I was like, whoa, I don't know what's going on, but I can't be here anymore. I cannot be in this bar, right? And I just started walking, wandering. And before I knew it, the feeling was that I was being led. I started feeling like there was a string attached to my heart that was just leading me. And I just started following that. I had never had any experience like this prior. And it led me to the oddest, strangest, most unspiritual spot on the surface. The least, the least likely spot, you could say, to have a spiritual awakening experience. It was a little clearing next to the train tracks behind this row of bars. There were tarps there where it looked like homeless people had been staying there. There were beer cans and soda cans around. It looked like, high school kids had been, partying there. And before I knew it, I felt this force push me to the ground. And I laid on my back and I looked up and I was frozen. I was frozen in the stasis, but it was this really pleasurable stasis. I started feeling these waves of, the only word that I could use that could adequately describe it is orgasmic, pleasurable energy running from my toe to my head and back and forth. The way I described it afterwards, when I told my mom about the experience the day after, that I called it a cosmic orgasm, 1,000 times more powerful than any physical orgasm. And I lay there frozen, just in this pleasurable state. And then I looked around me, and in this it was this circular clearing, again, next to the train tracks. And there were trees all around, and every corner of every leaf had a golden ornament. And within this golden ornament, there was a little being, and they were all simultaneously waving at me. And I heard him, I said, "Hi, Matthew, hi, Matthew, hi, Matthew, hi, Matthew." And that was the moment that my atheism dissolved instantly. And I knew that there was so much more. And I knew in that moment that I was multidimensional. I knew that, I just knew, I don't know how I knew, I just knew that all of these beings and these ornaments that were waving at me were me. They were different versions of me. And I got the feeling in that moment that some of these beings were not even from Earth, that some of these beings that were me were actually from off planet, from whether it be in this galaxy or another galaxy. And after that experience, I was never the same. I had no interest. I honestly, before that, had little interest in ever having a 9-to-5 job, because my dad, although he was a scientist, he had a very interesting job. He was exhausted all the time because he worked a ton. And, he was a cancer. He went to the same place for work every day. And I found that he worked at the same lab for 35 years or something like that. And I just found it very boring. So even before this event, I never wanted a normal job. I wanted to be an entertainer of some sort, right? But after this experience, I definitely knew I never wanted to fit into the matrix at all. I never wanted to have a normal job or career. And after that, my obsession became with figuring out what that experience was and what it meant, and just how everything works. How does the universe work? How does life work? What are past lives? What is a starseed? And that's what led me down the road. And at the same time, it coincided with, it was shortly after an incredibly traumatic heartbreak experience. I'm a Venus in Scorpio conjunct Pluto in Scorpio. I'm as Scorpio as it gets. I'm Scorpio AF for the youngins out there. Okay. So for me, like, my first love and how deep it went when it ended, it was incredibly traumatic. And my physical body was creating all sorts of weird symptoms just from the effects of the trauma. And I felt very lost. And then after this experience, it shifted from that depression and that trying to just, figure out the heartbreak, to trying to figure out the universe and everything. And along the way, I still carried that heartbreak with me, and I carried some of the physical issues with me. And I traveled to Mexico, and I traveled to Jordan, went to Petra. I traveled to Australia. I traveled all over Europe, and just seeking any spiritual place that I could go to, so I could just try to figure this all out. And, lo and behold, fast forward, we're 15 years later now, and all of this was the beginnings of a journey that would mold me into the spiritual teacher that I was always meant to become.
Please tell us about the awareness that led you to being a medical intuitive and healer.
The medical intuition came on for me only recently, I'd say about 7 years ago. And I had already been doing the soul plan readings then. And I just had this feeling that I could do it, and I could really do it. And I just started practicing, during readings, like, hey, can I also do a body scan and see what's going on inside you? And people were like, of course. And I started realizing I could see what the organs look like. I can see heavy metals. I can see viruses. I can see cancers. I can see a lot of different stuff that are very helpful for people to know. And then if there is a problem, they can go get a CT scan or go get a blood test or whatever. So I still do that service for people once in a while, if they do a medical intuitive reading with me.
And how else did your intuitive, psychic, and mediumistic faculties open, and how did you put these into practice?
I will describe the evolution of my intuitive faculties as a stairway where as like if I imagine a stairway, I'm looking at my own stairway right now, and a timeline going up that stairway, and there's certain points where I would receive downloads that would activate either a gift from another lifetime or from outside of Earth, or it would strengthen an existing gift. For example, my Starseed discovery sessions, which are very unique, very different than what anyone else out there in the New Age community is doing. I've done almost 1,000 of these over the past decade, where I guide people to their home planet, their place of origin, but I'm also able to show them exactly where their soul came from. Okay, you went from here to here to here to here. You fractalized and went here. And that just came to me 2017. I was sitting at my parents' house on their swing, and I just felt something come into me. And I was like, oh my God, I need to do these Starseed regressions. And I got on my laptop and started like frantically typing out a script for a regression session, but for starseeds, not past lives, for starseeds. So that's an example of like over the years since the initial experience, which was the one I described was 2010. Since then, there were just like 2012, I was in Mexico, and I all of a sudden realized that, okay, I was already reading tarot cards, but I realized now I was getting visions. So when I was doing the tarot readings for people, I started getting visions simultaneously. So it's just like, as the years went by, there would be different moments where something would just be activated, and it all builds across it builds upon what I already had. And it's like, walking up the steps, and now I'm like way up the stairway. But the exciting thing is I'm sure the stairway keeps going, and there's even a further refinement and accuracy and depth to the types of psychic and intuitive information I can bring in.
Tell us about the angels, archangels, and ascended masters that you work with, and each of these guides and what they share with you.
So, boy, you asked some pretty interesting questions. So, I love working with Archangel Michael, especially when I do the angel energy healing sessions. The ending of the final part of the session is an auric cleansing, and we rely on the assistance of both Michael and the Michael angels, the cherub angels that basically, if you want to call it, work for Michael, like, are the mini Michaels essentially. And we work with them to clear out the aura and clear out any stuff that needs to be removed. I work with Archangel Raphael doing physical healing stuff. I love working with the extraterrestrials. So I channel the Syrians once a month in my group program called Ascending as One. And I've channeled the Pleiadians, the Lyrans, the Agarthians from the inner Earth, the Blue Avians, the Arcturians, and I'm sure there's others that will end up being channeled through me in the future. But I love to work with extraterrestrials. And as far as Ascended Masters go, I will communicate with the Ascended Master Jesus Christ. Again, going back to my atheistic upbringing, it's kind of humorous, but I'll communicate with that Ascended Master sometimes. It doesn't mean he existed on Earth. I don't know if he existed ever on Earth. I'm very skeptical, but I know that he's an Ascended Master nonetheless. And then I consider I consider Metatron to be an ascended master, although technically he's an archangel. There's others I'm missing. I taught a whole class on archangels, ascended masters, and we connected with Celtic ones like Maeve or even Greek and Greek masters. So the Hindu masters, deities. I love connecting with Lakshmi and Vishnu or Ganesh So I consider myself a free agent when it comes to religion. And independent, just like I've always voted independent. I've never been a Democrat, never been a Republican, and I try not to vote for either party. I'm an independent. I'm the same when it comes to spiritually. I'm an independent, and I'll work with anybody.
My guest is Matthew John. Matthew, please share with our listeners where they can find out more about you and your amazing work.
Super easy. Website, youaredivinehuman.org. Just remember it's .org. youaredivinehuman.org. I'm very active also on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, it's at Matthew John Healer. YouTube, Matthew John, or Higher Self. There's 2 different channels.
And we'll be back with more of Matthew after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
Out here in the middle of all these acres, it can feel like you're the only person on Earth. And sometimes, that's how it feels when you're going through tough times. Trouble sleeping, your mind racing. So what do? We get help. There are people in our community who are here for us. Sometimes, just talking to someone can make all the difference in the world. Find more information at loveyourmindtoday.org. That's loveyourmindtoday.org. Brought to you by the Huntsman Mental Health Institute and the Ad Council.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Matthew John. Matthew, your bio says, and you shared earlier, that you're a Sirian, Blue Avian, Orion, and Andromedan starseed. What are the qualities of each of these origins, and how do you share them in your practice?
I mean, I love clementines, I love tangerines, and I love navels. How do I differentiate between those? I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
I'm sorry. I had to. Okay. The Syrians are my closest connection. The Syrians are, just briefly, they're really blue. I lived in Brazil, and Brazil was an amazing part of my spiritual evolution. And I was a part of an ayahuasca church down there called Santo Daime. And I will never forget, during one of the Santo Daime sessions, works as they call them, at the end of it, my friend Mike from the UK, he turns to me, and we're both like in the post-ayahuasca glow. And he says, Matt, I saw you as this giant blue being. I'm like, whoa, that's the Syrian me. You saw the Syrian me. He's like, yep. So that was great confirmation then. But the Syrians are very blue. They're very funny. They're very lighthearted. They work very well as a collective, and they're very service oriented. And Syrian starseeds here on Earth, we're similar. We're very service oriented. How can I serve you? How can I pride myself in taking care of my family, taking care of my animals, taking care of my clients, taking care of my community, right? And that's super important to Syrians. We're obsessed with water. Like, we have to live by the water. I live, right here on Canisius Lake, and we have to live by the water. The beach growing up, Durand Beach, Lake Ontario, that's my favorite place maybe in the world, and it still is, And crystals, we're so good at working with crystals, especially quartz, because on the Syrian planets, everything is quartz. Everything is quartz, and they know how to utilize the quartz to create healing, to create frequency upgrades, etc. And also the color blue. Like, any Syrian starseed out there, if blue is your favorite color, that's a good confirmation, right? So that was the first piece that I discovered, the Syrian self. The second piece I discovered was the Orion self, where that's when I started really digging into learning about the reptilians, the draconians, the Orion Wars, right? What happened in Atlantis and Lemuria? How does that all relate to Orion's belt? And I figured out, okay, I was definitely also in Orion's belt as well. And then the Blue Avian piece, I'll never ever forget this either. Well, I was at my parents' house, and I took an evening shower. I think I had just been out for a run or something, and I took an evening shower. And as I got out of the shower, I turned around, and I just felt overcome, like every hair on my body stood up. And I felt this like really high vibration, and I turn around, and there's a giant blue being with wings about 8.5 feet tall, standing about 3 feet away from me. And I was just frozen. And then they just disappeared. And then I was like, oh my God, that was a blue avian. Oh my God, that's why I've always been obsessed with flight. One of my potential career paths that I was looking into was being a pilot. And one of my aspirations in life, my bucket list things, I have to get a pilot's license. So many blue avian starseeds. If you're obsessed with flight, it's because you're blue avian. And also birds. Victor, I have so many bird feeders around, and now that it's April, next week, I can actually start to fill them up and, get those going again. I love feeding the birds, observing them, listening to them. We had the total solar eclipse last week. During totality, the biggest thing I noticed, other than the fact that people were lighting off fireworks, which actually I thought was pretty cool, was the geese. The geese from the beach started going crazy right during totality. And then as soon as the sun started coming up again on the other side of totality, they shut up. And I was like, oh my God, that was so cool. The geese were, either confused or celebrating, right? And then the other piece, the Andromedan piece, I realized that all of this, those are all Milky Way experiences, Sirian, Blue Avian, and Orion. But if I trace myself all the way back, I know that I come from the Andromeda galaxy, which is our big sister galaxy. And so many starseeds, Milky Way starseeds do come from the Andromeda galaxy.
You had touched upon this before. How do you help those who are called to work with you identify their starseed family and the galactic origin of their souls?
Yeah. So remember, you had asked me about like the development of my spiritual and psychic gifts. And I kind of described how, okay, as time goes on, time, went on, I more and more gifts started getting downloaded. And that's essentially what it was. So I started out, I described you that experience of sitting on my parents' swing in the summertime, and the Starseed discovery sessions were downloaded to me. And then once I started doing the regressions, I realized that I'm just able to actually also see where someone is from. So then I realized I didn't have to do the Starseed session. The Starseed session's fun, and I still do them once in a while for people. But most of the time, all I'm doing is I close my eyes and I tell my guides to show me where you're from in the stars. and I see visions of different star systems. And because I've done like thousands of these readings by now, I know where everything is. Once in a while, one will stump me where I'm feeling it. I'm not sure exactly where it is, and that's where I have a star map, a map of the universe right in my office here, and I'll even go and I'll just tell my guides to guide my hand so that I can at least tell them, hey, I don't know exactly which star system or which galaxy this is, but it's in the Taurus part of the sky, or it's in the Leo part of the sky, or it's in the Aquarius part of the sky.
Is everyone currently incarnated on Earth a starseed?
No, and that's a great question. My receiving that I received, this was about 8 years ago now, was that it's about 42% of Earth are starseeds. Out of that 42%, it's about 99.5% that aren't awakened yet to it. But that being said, with the acceleration of this ascension process on the planet, more and more people are waking up to it. But it's interesting that, because I think, at least the way I perceived it, going back to the channel materials of the 80s and the 90s and even the early 2000s, I think there was a subtle sense of gatekeeping when it came to being a starseed, where the rhetoric was that it was only a select few, and then this idea of like, oh, the chosen 144,000 came in, right? And my sense was always that was inaccurate, that it's way more than that. And I do believe in the accuracy, more or less, around 40% are starseeds. If you're not a starseed, the term that I use is earth seed. It essentially means your soul originates from Earth. A starseed, what is a starseed? To simplify it as simple as I can, it means your soul originated somewhere other than Earth, and you came to Earth essentially on a study abroad. If you're an earth seed, your soul originates from the Earth itself.
How might listeners, without getting a reading per se, determine whether or not they have a starseed origin, not a specific, but a starseed origin? What are the things that come up in the lives of people who are starseed origins?
A fascination with the stars, in one way or another. Like, and it doesn't even have to be astronomy. It doesn't have to be astrology. A good example, my father, who I know, his soul's a starseed, but he never, again, he was an atheist. He was a scientist. He thought, he was open to hearing what I had to say, but he didn't really believe most of, what I believed in. But he was always obsessed with science fiction, with Star Trek, with Star Wars, with science fiction movies, books, etc. When I was a kid, like my dad, we had to go to every science fiction, movie in the theaters. And like looking back, well, for him, that was the indication. But he didn't know, what that meant, which is fine. And I think that's the case with like how I'm describing that. 4 out of every 10 people out there are starseeds, but 99% of them don't know it. And the starseeds just have more of an interest in the stars, whether that's looking at the stars in astronomy or astrology or science fiction movies or whatever, just any, just UFOs, aliens in general. There's just going to be an interest there. So if you have an interest, it's almost certain you probably are. And I'd say the number one thing is just a fascination with looking at the stars themselves, especially when you were younger. Do you remember, before your logical adult mind kicked in, did you have a real fascination with looking at the stars?
I had a lot of experiences as a kid, which we're going to share when we do our interview with me being interviewed by you. But back in the early 90s, I was attending a New Life Expo here in New York City. And the speaker that I was sitting in on was a woman by the name of Barbara Marciniak.
Yes, I have her books. Yeah,
she wrote a book called Bringers of the Dawn, talking about the Pleiadians. And she was talking about
and then the Pleiadian agenda, right?
And she was talking about this, and then she looked at me, made direct eye contact. There was a lot of people in this room. She made direct eye contact with me and smiled. And when she did that, I said, I must be a Pleiadian.
Yeah, you certainly are, sir. And what an amazing way to, learn that. That's great.
Absolutely. And as we discussed when we did that little session with Neil and with Craig Campabasso, he's also a Pleiadian.
Yes, yes. I interviewed Craig on my show as well. Absolutely.
So, what lessons are available to us with each new incarnation, and how may we recognize and embrace these?
Oh, great question. It depends on the intention of the incarnation. So your soul will either be intending to, and it's not black or white here, but your soul, when planning out a lifetime, the intentions are either to have certain experiences that the soul has not had yet. I like to look at a life as a series of Shakespearean plays. And through, most of us, my understanding is we live at the very least hundreds of lifetimes, and for many into the thousands. And we want to experience every possible angle of the human experience. And ultimately the human experience, and I think as a Cancer ascendant, you probably know this, that, the human experience is an emotional experience, right? So it's the soul wants to experience every possible emotion. And on top of that, the soul wants to experience different cultures, different beliefs, different religions, different perspectives, etc. So a lot of times the purpose of a life is simply to experience something different. Sometimes the purpose is, and again, these will intertwine, is to balance out karma or to play a specific role in a soul contract for another soul that has been agreed upon before incarnating. And then sometimes there's specific intentions to evolve. And that was going back to your question. For those of us that are finding this type of content, to be honest, listening to this show, watching my show, etc., you guys are the awakening ones. We're the awakening ones, right? Our souls have said, okay, we've spent enough time tossing karma back and forth. I look at karma like a boomerang, right? I have a wonderful Aboriginal boomerang right here by my desk. And, you throw karma back and forth like a boomerang. Of course, whatever you put out comes back to you, but it doesn't come back in the same way. It might come back in a future life, etc. But at a certain point, your soul says, okay, that's enough. I did enough experiencing. I did enough tossing karma back and forth. I'm ready to vibrationally ascend. And that's when you choose the ascension life, as I call it, where basically whatever karma that you're carrying with you, whatever unresolved things and soul contracts with other souls that you're carrying with you, you have to resolve and alchemize all of that in the context of a single lifetime. And as you do, you are vibrationally stepping up a vibrational step ladder towards, you could call it the fourth density, from the third to the fourth, or you could call it the fifth dimension. And this is what most of us that are finding this sort of content are going through right now. So you have to evolve in every possible way, is kind of the short answer in this life. And your soul will have you working on different subjects. It's like in school where, in high school, right? You go from, homeroom, then the bell rings, and geography, then the bell rings, and math, right? Well, in your life, at certain points, time periods in your life, you're working on different themes, different unresolved themes, unresolved lessons that are carried from other lives. And then when you master those, you move on to other ones. And sometimes you circle back and check your work.
You kind of touched on this, but do we come into each incarnation with soul contracts for who's going to be in our family and other relationships? And how do we balance those?
Yeah, absolutely. So soul contracts are very specific for the most part. It will, everything is very nuanced. As I've gone down this 15-year path of just trying to figure out everything, right, including soul contracts, I have discovered that some soul contracts will be more intricately planned out than others. But you can be assured that your closest connections, so romantic partners, ex-romantic partners, family, from your parents to your children to your siblings, very good, close friends, right? And even like very impactful people in your life. Maybe there was a mentor or a boss that was very impactful, or a teacher that was very impactful. There are soul contracts, pre-birth arrangements that are made with all of these people, and there's very specific reasons. Sometimes it's about balancing out karma that's carried over from other lifetimes. That's the answer to why, if you have a very difficult relationship with a sibling, with an adult child, etc., the answer to why is because of what's carried over from other lifetimes. But sometimes it's just you're meant to have a specific. Think about a person in your life that either someone that just came into your path, right? That had a tremendous impact on you, whether it was a teacher, a healer, a mentor, a random meeting, and then they just kind of, went away. You didn't really connect with them further. That's a soul contract too. And maybe in another lifetime, you did that for them. Maybe in another lifetime, you were there for them at a certain crossroads. So all the important stuff is pre-planned through soul contracts.
My guest is Matthew John. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Matthew John. Matthew, I had a wonderful spiritual teacher who used to say there should be an 11th commandment. Thou shalt have purpose. How do we know if we're fulfilling our purpose in each incarnation? And what would you advise that we do if that purpose seems contrary to our soul's mission?
Well, what a great question. And, 11's kind of an uneven number. I don't actually know what the 10 commandments are, but I got to imagine there's one in there that's a little outdated that we can just, slide yours in, because I think that's pretty darn important. I think, if you look at the research of Dr. Bruce Lipton, for example, right, about how our telomeres in our DNA works, right? The ends of the strands of the DNA are the telomeres. And when people lose a sense of purpose, those telomeres deteriorate, right? And our lifespan shortens. And when, people have a strong sense of purpose, that the telomeres, there's a telomerase, right, is the enzyme that prevents the deterioration of the telomeres, right? Like, it's literally written, purpose is written into our DNA as human beings. When we have purpose, we have health. When we have purpose, we have joy. It's the most important thing. And it's the thing that gives me the most pleasure, the most joy in helping people with, is finding their purpose. I speak about it at length, online, in person, etc. It's a big feature of my seminars and my retreats. it just makes me feel really happy when I'm able to help someone find their purpose. One of my favorite ways to help someone find their purpose is through astrology. Astrology is absolutely one of my passions, and everything is written into the planets, into the natal chart. And it's very easy for me to look at someone's natal chart and be able to really determine what their soul, what their soul has prioritized as far as purpose in this life. And, it's important to understand about purpose that it's not just a career. That's an aspect of purpose. But purpose is much deeper and broader than that. For example, I get so many women who are, have young children, and they're confused about their purpose as far as a career. They're fortunate enough to be in a stable marriage where their husbands are, the breadwinners that are able to provide for the family. And a lot of times I can look at their chart and feel into their life plan and their soul contract with their husband. And, in the lifetime before that, they might have worked their butts off and been miserable. And in this life, they wanted to be a mother. And that's the biggest piece of purpose, was to be a mother. Same for a lot of men. A lot of men out there, the biggest piece of purpose is not about a career. It's about being a dad. And then there's a lot of people that never have kids and their soul didn't want to have kids. And it is all about the career. And then, it's everywhere in between. And it's just important to understand that it's not just about a career. That's just one aspect. For me, my career is my life, and everything all of my opportunities in life, everything comes as a corollary to my career. I'm an Aries North Node in the 9th house. I was born to be a spiritual teacher. And for me, it's pretty simple to see that in my chart. But for other people, I just want to, say it's not as simple as just a career. But as far as a career goes, there's always something that you can find. And whatever you do find, it's exactly what your soul had planned for you when you reach the requisite vibration to be able to match with that career. And if you're in a job that you don't like right now, think of it in terms of vibration. In doing your spiritual work, going on your spiritual mission to elevate yourself vibrationally so that you can match vibrationally with the next step in your career, which is a more purpose-driven, soul-driven career.
Absolutely. That's something that I personally experienced, and I know many people who arrive at their late 50s and early 60s and perhaps retire from the quote-unquote day job and find a new purpose at that point. And that purpose often is a spiritual purpose, a healing purpose, and a helping purpose.
Absolutely. And it doesn't even have to be a career or job where you're paid. I know a lot of clients out there that they had a job, they retired, they have a retirement to have as a nest, and they have a volunteer mission, right? They're working to save animals, or they're working, with children that are in need or whatever. And it's not even for money, right? So it's very nuanced, but it is the most important thing in life, is to wake up every day with a sense of purpose and a sense of where you're going. But there are people that really struggle. And for example, to relate astrology, I mean, people that were born when the moon void Aquarius, for example, moon void Aquarius births, you're going to kind of feel that sense of lack of tetherness throughout your life and lack of direction. Even being born under Mercury retrograde can contribute to that. Having a Pisces sun, especially if there's an exaltation there, or having a stellium in the 12th house, so that's why I find astrology so helpful, because it's the shortcut for me to be able to help people, figure all this out.
Matthew, tell us about your Ascending as One mentorship group.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, this has become the biggest passion in my career over the past 2 years. This is Ascending as One program. I have been able to, I've had, we're up to about 500 people in total that have been in the group. Right now, we're close to 100 people in the group, so it's been super successful. These are group mentorship calls. We meet on Sundays, and they are really in depth. They're 3-hour calls. The first hour is astrology, like I was just talking about. astrology being such a passion of mine, I go from the macro astrology, what's going on with the nodes and the outer planets and the sun's transits and all that, all the way down to the inner planets, and then the day to day. Monday, the moon's void of course at this time. Tuesday, Mars sextiles Venus, etc. So we go into the nitty gritty day to day, so people can plan out their entire week. So that part is really helpful. We start with that. Then we go into an amazing topic where their topics are meant to enlighten and heal. For example, when we're recording this, I'm getting ready to do my Healing Your Throat Chakra call, then our Connecting with Lemuria call, Nutrition for Ascension, how to do shamanic drumming. I also channel the Syrians once a month on the VIP call. And I also do, Q&A and readings, and I do EFT tapping as well at the end of every call to help integrate everything we've learned. So people have so much fun with these. And what's cool is that there's people from literally all around the world, from every continent, except for Antarctica. I haven't had one yet, but maybe soon, right? But people from all around the world join in, and it's a great community as well. And that was one of my main intentions of creating the Ascending as One program, was to create an online community where people from around the world could come together and just make friends and exchange info and keep in touch. And that's why I have a Telegram group that every day people are interacting in the Telegram group, sharing what's going on in the world, our thoughts. The eclipse was last week, and we were, everyone in the group was very active, sharing our pictures and videos and experiences of the eclipse. So it's a great group. It's a great networking opportunity to get to know a lot of healers, not just me, but I have a ton of healers that end up joining the group, and the calls are very healing. I've had very transformational, testimonials from people, for especially like doing some of the chakra healing calls, doing the past life healing and the ancestral healing calls, where they've had real amazing shifts happen because of the healing work that we did on the call. So it's not just astrology. It's not just, networking and fun. They're also very, very healing and very potent. And the great thing is, if for whatever reason Sundays at 4 p.m. Eastern don't work for you, you can still join the group and watch the replay. And if you join VIP, you also get a private reading with me outside of class, where you can ask me literally anything.
We're living in difficult times, perhaps the most difficult I can recall in my 71 years of this incarnation. What message of hope would you offer us from your guides?
Yeah, my message of hope would be to be patient and to know that wherever you are is where you're meant to be. And although things can get scary out there, if you are meant to be here and be a part of this whole awakening experience of the planet, to be a part of this planetary ascension, to have the faith that you will be guided continually to be safe, to be taken care of by your guides, and to be exactly where you need to be to have the impact you need to have. And remember that there's always been a lot of weird, scary, difficult stuff going on in the world, in the news. That's not new. Yes, what's been going on this decade is arguably the most difficult in most of our lifetimes, yes. However, bad news and war and disease and famine and all the nasty stuff is not new. And remember that your home, your room, your community, the places you frequent, anywhere that you're physically at, you can make into a wonderful bubble of love and light. And my home is my sanctuary. My mom's home is another sanctuary. The beach, as I mentioned earlier, is a sanctuary. I create these my car is a sanctuary. I create sanctuaries wherever I go, where the places I frequent, where no matter what is my phone is telling me is going on in the world, I can just be in a place of peace and love and light. And I just would really remind everyone of that, to make your space a sanctuary.
Absolutely. And I'll add one thing to that, if I may. This is the time that I advocate we extend radical kindness to our sisters and brothers.
Yes, I agree. I agree. It's more the worse the world gets on the outside, the more important that becomes.
Absolutely.
The more, maybe not word, the better word is the more divisive, the more divided the world gets on the outside, the more important that becomes. And remember, we also have a very contentious election coming up in a couple months here stateside as well. And there will be a lot of tension with that too, of course. There always is. There always has been whenever that comes about. So exactly what you said is more important this year than ever before.
My wonderful guest, Matthew John. Matthew, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can find more about you and your work.
YouAreADivineHuman.org. YouAreADivineHuman.org. Instagram at Matthew John Healer. YouTube, search Matthew John. I'm Matthew John, spiritual teacher. I'm not Matthew John, the musician, but I'm Matthew John, spiritual teacher. And also my other channel is Higher Self on YouTube.
Matthew, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience and wisdom.
Victor, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it thoroughly. You ask really amazing questions, and that just makes such a great interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Herman. Have a wonderful week.